sirens in the streets outside, and there was a helicopter flying around overhead, and the sounds of barking dogs and shouting people. He looked out his window and saw a great deal of police activity, so he went online to discover what was going on. "Serial killer escapes," said the headlines. As he read further, the man discovered a crazed serial killer had broken loose, and that he was believed to be in this man's neighborhood. But he wasn't too worried. As all victims of horror movies and stories are not too worried. As the night wore on, the noise wound down, and the man went back to bed. Suddenly, the man was startled awake. He thought he had heard a sound. He listened carefully and was just about to go back to sleep when he heard it again. This time, he was sure someone was trying to get in his front door. The man looked down the hallway, terrified, not knowing what to do. The only way out of his room without going into the hallway was through the window. He couldn't climb out, could he? His mind was made up, and as he saw the door wobble in its frame as someone threw their entire weight against it, without another moment of hesitation, the man leapt out of his window and ran into his yard. He paused to look over his shoulder just in time to see the light go on in his bedroom and a team of police officers pile in. The man was amazed and relieved at the same time, until he felt a hand clamp tight over his mouth and the cold steel of a serial killer's knife against his throat. Next story. The Hitchhiker. A man moved to a small town and slowly got to know a few of his new neighbors. He soon learned that most of the residents believed that one of the roads out of town was haunted, but he didn't believe in ghosts, so he never asked why. One day, the man went to visit a friend in another town. He was enjoying his visit so much that he ended up staying much later than he had planned. By the time he left for home, it was way past midnight. There was no moon that night, and once he left the town limits, the only lighting came from his headlights. Soon it began raining, and the rain made it even more difficult to see. As a result, it was almost too late to brake when he saw a woman on the road. He jammed his foot hard to the floor and the car swerved in the road before coming to a stop just inches from her legs. Normally the man would have driven off again, but it was so late and the weather was terrible, he decided to offer the woman a ride. She got into his car and held her hands up to the vents to capture the warmth. They drove without speaking, and when they reached town, the woman directed him to her home, thanked him for the ride, and went inside. When the man got home, he discovered that she had left her hoodie in his car. He thought about driving back to her house, but it was so late that he decided to go inside to bed and return the hoodie the next day. The next morning, he drove back to the house where he had dropped her off, walked to the door, and rang the bell. An older woman answered the door, and he handed her the hoodie. "I gave your daughter a ride home last night, and she left this in my car," he said. The woman began to cry. "My daughter was killed by a hit-and-run driver many years ago," she said. "It happened on the road into town, and she was wearing a hoodie just like this one." The 13th floor. The first hotel in the Americas to have more than 13 floors had a huge Halloween party to celebrate its opening. Each floor was set up like a maze decorated with cobwebs and other Halloween decorations. There were lots of people dressed up as ghosts and ghouls to frighten the partygoers. An exciting prize was hidden on the top floor, and the first person to reach the prize would win it. Jack and Sophia were two of the partygoers. They worked their way easily through the mazes on the first few floors. As they headed up through the building, the hallways on each floor got darker and scarier. When they got to the 12th floor, Jack and Sophia heard a blood-curdling scream. As they made their way through the maze, they heard more screams and cries for help. Finally, in the lobby by the elevators, they saw blood dripping from the ceiling. The elevator dinged and the doors slowly opened, which was strange because every other time they used the elevator, the doors had been quick and smooth. The light in the elevator was flickering as they stepped in, and as the doors began to close, the lights went out completely. And then screams so loud the entire building heard them began to ring out. At first, the partygoers thought it was part of the scary Halloween theme, but then the owners of the building turned on all the lights and asked everyone to return to the lobby. But when people tried to use the elevator, it never came. The bell would ding, but the doors wouldn't open, and they were all forced to use the stairs. Down in the lobby, the building owners explained that they had not played the sounds of the screams, and as they did a check for everyone who had come back, they realized Jack and Sophia had not returned. Just then, the doors to the elevator opened. It was empty except for Jack's watch, one of Sophia's shoes, and a pool of blood. Jack and Sophia were never seen again, and the building owners took away the button in the elevator for the 13th floor, so nobody could ever drives back to the campsite, but became lost in the unfamiliar backcountry. Being experienced hikers, they knew once they were lost, it was best to stay in one place than wander in the woods, so they prepared to settle down and wait for a rescue. Darkness fell, and the family built a fire to keep warm. As they snuggled up against each other and started to drift off to sleep, they heard a noise coming from the nearby trees. "Who's there?" one of the parents called, but there was no answer. Then they heard the sound again, but once more when they called out, there was no answer. "Perhaps it's someone who can't speak," suggested the daughter, so her mom called out, "Is there anyone there? Clap once for yes, clap twice for no." There was one clap. "You were right," the parents said to their daughter. "There is someone out there." "Are you here to rescue us?" shouted the mom. Clap, clap. "Are you lost like us?" Clap, clap. "Do you live out here in the woods?" Clap, clap. "Let me try," said the son. "Are you a boy?" Clap, clap. "Are you a girl?" Clap, clap. They all looked at each other, puzzled. Then thinking he was being funny, the son asked, "Are you human?" Clap, clap. Now the family was scared. "Are you alone?" called the mom. Clap, clap. The family huddled together more. "How many of you are there then?"